Welcome to Inside the Mavs. Kevin Gray, Mavs insider for 105 through the fan. Of course, joined by my partner, Grant Afseth of Mavs SI. Appreciate you joining us wherever you get your podcast for free. You can also check it out on YouTube as well. Make sure you hit the subscribe button while you're there. You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast for free. Really looking forward to our episode today. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. You can find Grant on Twitter at Grant Afseth. Grant, what's going on? How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm looking forward to talking about the draft while we still have some opportunities.
Yeah, about 10 days away as we record this from the NBA draft. Of course, the NBA draft taking place on Thursday, June 22nd. The Mavericks having the number 10 overall pick, and we couldn't think of anybody better with 10 days to go to talk to about the 2023 NBA draft class. So excited for our guest today. You can find him on Twitter at Mavs Draft, credentialed NBA draft expert, locked on NBA big board as well. Proud North Texas Mean Green alum. Richard Stayman joining us here on Inside the Mavs. Richard, what's going on?
Hey, it's good to be back. I think the last time we did this was 2020, and I want to say we debated, who we thought the Mavs should take between Josh Green, Saddiq Bey, and a player I will not name to make sure there's no hurt wounds.
I know, right? Yeah, it's funny that you bring that draft up because as that draft started to fall, there was a few names that had started to kind of coalesce. I was like, oh, well, maybe because it was between Green, Saddiq Bey, Desmond Bane was still there and available. And my personal favorite at the time was Saddiq Bey out of Villanova. That's who I thought kind of was a ready-made prospect, could come in and be able to play. And of course, Rick Carlisle and the guys took the guy with the what they felt was the most defensive upside at the time, because as we're talking 3 years later, defense was kind of the thing that they were looking for at the time. But let's just start there because it's interesting that we're talking about that class. What have you thought about Josh Green's development in that now, 2-3 year span since that draft, and what he is now as a pretty viable asset for this team now going forward?
Yeah, it's an interesting turn of events how everything played out. The first year was kind of a dud, but it was kind of expected. He was never supposed to be this immediate help, right? But you look at last season, Desmond Bane goes, Josh Green's not even playing, and they took him over me and kind of sparked the Mavs to have to play him. And ever since then, it's all been positive. I mean, we've seen jump after jump. We've seen the realistic just improvements, intangible improvements, functional improvements in game. The hope is, obviously, as he enters his contract year, he takes an actual big jump. I mean, a lot of his jump shots still are open. Will teams respect it? And will he hit his jump shots? Will he be able to improve more in the half court even more? There's so many different variables, and I'm really excited to see what his fourth year looks like.
Yeah, it seemed like, he got more comfortable taking open shots, attacking, like the closeouts that are coming more his way. But what do you think about his fit alongside, Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic? What would you like to see him kind of get comfortable doing or improve, since he sort of struggled a little bit after Kyrie was brought into the team?
Yeah, that's tough. Obviously, everybody could be a little bit better defensively, but I mean, with Green, it's just finding that niche role every single night. I feel like he's still running around in some ways with his head, like a chicken with its head cut off, where he doesn't know what to do some nights. And it's because he's being told, hey, cut, actually stay on the 3-point line and just shoot. Hey, cut again. Like, why are you not cutting? And it's just like all this stuff in his head, and it's just clear that out and just go out, like be able to know your personnel on the other end and say, all right, I know this guy's a weak off ball defender, be able to cut, beat him. He's going to be missing me. He's not going to pay attention. Know when to take advantage of the scouting report. I think it's going to open up a lot for him.
When you look at not just Josh Green, but another guy that's turned himself into a valuable asset, I mean, we can't have this conversation not talking about Jaden Hardy and the year that he had under Jason Kidd and his team. What did you think about his growth and development and what he can continue to improve on in terms of his game for the Mavericks?
Yeah, it's funny. I completely misevaluated him last year. I was very low on him. I thought the inefficiencies in the G League, him being a day one guy, I really grossly, I learned from my mistake, but I missed. Obviously his jump shot is really nice. I think that's just very valuable asset. Any given night, he can be at the minimum an off-ball guard. But as he continues to develop, more playmaking, things like that, I think he's already as a rookie exceeded expectations. I mean, just from synergy, he was in the 85th percentile in catch and shoot efficiency per possession. Like that stuff's really strong for a rookie. And you imagine those numbers are only going to get better because he shot 39% from three. And there's a very real chance that goes up 1% or more and crosses that 40 line.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like kind of early on, his 3-point shooting wasn't dropping, if I remember correctly. But then it seemed to really like kind of catch a rhythm, and I feel like he worked quite well with Luka as that like off ball guard, like kind of catch and shoot opportunities. I think something that I kind of like dug into the video, like before the summer league process and like after he was drafted, like making like high pick and roll reads, his finishing, all that stuff. I thought it was interesting, like dating back to the last year's summer league. It seemed like he did really well when when he was kind of put into like off ball actions, like where he didn't have to necessarily make that sort of like more complicated read, like like the zoom actions, all that stuff. And it seemed like that kind of carried over into the season. What do you kind of think in terms of his development going forward into like this upcoming summer league next season? Are those kind of things that you see as being like kind of like top priorities to kind of see progression from him?
Yeah, I mean that's perfectly said too. I mean, he's somebody that they just simplified his game, right? Where they were like, just come off screens and then be a decision maker. You don't need to initiate the offense yourself. Like that's not your strength. And I really think overall, I think they've done a great job developing him. I know it's almost unpopular. Like if you were to read like fan comments and then go to like what analysts say and stuff, it's just very different on how they approach the development. I think they did a good job in, not forcing the issue early in the season. They said, hey, he's not ready. Keep getting him reps down in Frisco, see what he can look like with more confidence, see if there's any one area that he can keep developing in. And really, I think it was just confidence made everything easier. And he looked like a vastly different player from January on. And for me, if he were to play in the summer league, I think he'd be like the best player on the court for most games. He'd probably play 2 games tops, dip out. We see it a lot. I know even dating back to like 2014, I remember 2015, Aaron Gordon did this, and I mean, he dominated. And it wouldn't shock me if Jaden Hardy did that same thing. But to answer the question, I mean, I really think it kind of just comes down to like what you said. I mean, the pick and roll, being able to develop also a reliable runner and floater, things like that, where you don't have to be this great finisher of the rim. It's something where I think that is a weakness. Negate it a little bit, right? Get that little floater where just drop bigs can't just say, all right, shoot at the rim against me and see what happens. It's you got to actually respect that in between game.
Yeah, because it seems like he's some players are can be a little reluctant to take shots, but he's the opposite. He's very fearless. Like he some of those like aggressive scorers, I feel like he's very fearless, challenging players at the rim, and I feel like finding that balance of like kind of navigating the rim protection, help rotations, and then as you said, like as he gets more like just initiating the offense, like high pick and roll situations, just kind of like using that pace and getting to a floater. I think those definitely seem to be like things to monitor going forward. But one thing I personally hope I know how many games he plays in summer league if he plays before I go out there. That's one thing I just want to throw out there. If I would love to hear how many he plays before he plays. But yeah, is there anyone else like with the 2-way contract players? Speaking of the summer league. Like with AJ Lawson and McKinley Wright, is there? I guess what did you see from them this last season, and what would you like to see from them if they participate? With the Mavs summer league.
Yeah, it's hard to say with Lawson because he came along so late in the season, but we saw him in summer league. He looked pretty good. I liked him. I think it was 2021 draft. Now I don't think he was a rookie rookie last year. I think he's freakishly athletic, has good defensive upside despite like the lack of length. And that's kind of what his game is going to be, right? An athletic defender who can, just throw it down in transition. The problem is the Mavs just don't run enough transition to utilize that element offensively. But McKinley Wright, I really do think there is something there. It's like a, new age JJ Barea kind of thing which is such a lame comparison. They're not the same player at all, but like just that undersized pesky guard who he doesn't back down from a challenge. And like, that's like a whole thing about the Mavs. Like they just embrace that. Mark Cuban loves that stuff. And I really do think there is some element. He's a good playmaker, despite being he's listed as 6 feet. I can tell you, I'd be shocked if he truly is, despite being that small. He really does have good vision. He can see over through defenses, I should say. He's very intelligent. He's strong, so he can hold his own on mismatches and in the post and things like that. I think, look, if you want a third string point guard, if you're aiming for someone that can add a little bit every single night, I might say take him over like Frank Ntilikina. Frank Ntilikina is kind of come and go. And if you want that every single night grit and grind kind of mentality, McKinley Wright's your guy.
Before we go to this year's class, I want to ask you a couple of things about obviously this past year's team and what the makeup of this team could possibly look like. We're anticipating that Kyrie Irving is going to be back with this team this upcoming summer. So for the sake of the conversation, we'll go with it. When you look at the rest of this roster, how are you building around Luka and Kyrie? Not expecting Christian Wood to come back necessarily. What are you looking at in terms of what you saw from this past season that gives you indications on what you would like to see this team based on their makeup right now?
Yeah, I mean, they got to change a lot of the personnel. I don't think there's enough playing to Luka's strengths, and there's not enough covering up, like playing to cover up Luka's weaknesses, right? Or even Kyrie's too, the same way. I mean, there's just not enough like give and take on this roster, right? They have good shooters. I think overall the team is actually, they did that part right. I think they got the jump shooting right, but you want to see them add more defenders, both at the rim, against players against shooting off the dribble, against simply just rotating. I mean, I don't know what happened this year. It's never been perfect, but I feel like in last season when they made the conference finals, the rotations were generally pretty sound. Like give or take any night, you could see it be great one night, be pretty poor. But this year it was just, I would say it was rare to see any consistent rotations for an entire 4 quarters and things like that. Like kind of segueing into the draft, there are players in this draft, especially that are targets at 10, even if they're not known as great defenders, they're very good in college about rotating. They see the next play. They go, all right, I missed, or I got switched out of a screen. I know where I have to be. It's not always the screener. And they know that. And I think getting someone like that is very valuable. And it's not just, oh, the Mavs need rim protection. That's the only defense. There are layers of that defense they need.
So with that being said, then give me, as we look at the number 10 overall pick in the NBA draft, Thursday, June 22nd, give me your most realistic option that could be there at 10 that fits that two-way player that the Mavericks really kind of need, whether it be 3-and-D, a guy that's got high upside defensively, that's better offensively right now. Who is that kind of realistic player for you that you could see there at number 10 if the Mavericks keep the pick?
Yeah, if you go to any 2 mock drafts, you're going to see honestly, every mock draft is somebody different at Dallas, right? You've had Taylor Hendricks, you have Jarris Walker, some have Anthony Black, some have Grady Dick, some have Derek Lively. Some of those are more reaches than others. Some of those are unrealistic, whatever you want to call it. I think if you're going for an ideal, what probably ends up happening, I still can't decide. No team has made it clear of who they like more between Taylor Hendricks and Jarris Walker, but I'd imagine one of those is there. Just kind of breaking it down really quickly, some differences, because they are very similar players, same conference. They were premier freshmen. Taylor Hendricks is the leading shot blocker in the conference, not even a big man. I thought that was really impressive. Way better shooter. That's the big difference. Jarris Walker, probably a better passer, but Taylor Hendricks is also a good passer. I would say the defense probably nods to Jarris Walker, also better frame, just stronger isn't really it, but there's so much give and take. I think if you can get one of those 2 guys, you solve multiple layers of the defense right away, right? You have somebody who can be a lockdown perimeter defender that can also block shots. When was the last time the Mavs had that? I mean, it's
been a while.
and if there is somebody, it's probably not like, maybe I'm absolutely drawing a blank on somebody, Dorian kind of in a way, but like, I think it's higher upside than that. Like a true, like all defense guy.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, when you kind of think about like Jarris Walker and Taylor Hendricks and, with the Mavericks being a win now team, I'm trying to visualize like the fit, like the day one fit or expectation. How ready do you think, or fluid do you think either of those guys would be kind of being a floor spacer, like out of the corner, or as like a ball screener, like short roll situation? Because I remember, when we had Rafael Barlow, earlier, he mentioned like looking at high school tape for Jarris Walker, and he really liked kind of how he played out of short rolls, things like that. Do you think that those could be like comfort levels for either of those guys, since they kind of would have to probably spend a little bit of time doing like kind of like that spacer or ball screener kind of like hybrid situation?
Yeah, both of them have the pros and cons of that, right? I mean, I think for Jarris Walker, just for example, he played the exact role that he will be playing as a rookie. He was put in the corner a lot of times, even though he's not much of a shooter. He was put in the corner. He was able to run some pick and roll, and he was outstanding in just the short roll. Like his decision making right there, his passing really pops, and that's where it pops. He sees like the next play, whether it's kicking out to the corners, back to the like a give and go, finding somebody at the top of the key, cutter, whatever it is, he sees it and identifies it and executes very quickly. Taylor Hendricks, on the other hand, he's also very good at it, but it's different. They ran a lot more like little flashes at the free throw line. Granted, they played almost an anti-zone offense, just kind of a zone busting offense a lot of times. And it was another same thing, right? It's similar to the short roll where it's like the same space of the floor, but not the same way you get the ball there. And from there, he can make those same decisions at a really high level. I just think Jarris executes a little bit quicker on what he sees. And that's the difference. And in the NBA where it's 24 seconds, and honestly, if you're not making a sharp decision in 10 seconds, you're probably turning it over and making a bad play. Like every microsecond matters.
When you look at this year's class in terms of big men, obviously rim protection, shot deterrence is needed for this team in a big way. Looking at Derek Lively, for example, would he be a reach for you at 10 if he was there for the Mavericks? Would you want to see him maybe go later in the lottery, maybe top 15, top 17, if that's an available option for a team? Would that be reaching at 10 for Lively there?
Yeah, I think the issue for me with Lively, I think he's a good prospect. I had him third preseason, but look, he just wasn't productive enough. I think it's a mismatch. The Mavs need a big man who can defend and do all these things day one, but that's just not what Lively's going to do. Like you're going to get somebody who is going to have a lot of rough patches. And I think when you're drafting at 10 for need, you got to get somebody. I mean, if both it's come down to like say Jarris Walker and him, it should not even be a debate. It should be Jarris Walker because the drop off of rim protection at that point, yeah, it's big, whatever, but he can defend the rim more. He's more fluid offensively. He's less likely to be played off the floor more easily, whether it's because of his offense or defense. With Lively, I mean, he has a lot of upside, and I think the ideal way is, look, if you can squeeze 2 picks and get something like if you got, it's not possible really because of the teams that are picking, you'd have to go through a lot of different fences, but say like, I don't know, you got the 15th pick and the 22nd pick somehow, like some weird stuff. Sure, you want Lively at 15, fine. I can live with that. I don't think Lively should be the entire draft. I feel like that's a lot of risk. He could be a day one guy because his whole thing at Duke, his situation was kind of weird. I think he was very passive, came onto the scene way too late. And that's kind of a question. It's like, why was he passive? Is this something that, truly is going away? Was it you got comfortable at Duke? Will there be the same things in the NBA where you have to get comfortable in the NBA first 30 games? We don't know. And if you're the Mavs, for a team that's trying to win a title right now, can you really live with that timeline? It's impatient and it sucks because in the long term, I think he's worth it. It's just, does that timeline align right now?
Yeah, I think one prospect that I've seen people kind of talking about, like not just Mavs related, but just in general a little bit more lately, is Anthony Black. I think on your Twitter feed, I think you've posted about him quite a bit last I think like last day or so. What are your thoughts on him? What do you think is appealing people? Kind of like, at that time leading into the draft where I guess you could say some experts are kind of giving that second look, like closer look. I'm sure there's more than 2 looks when you're starting in like July of last year, but like that, like post like scouting combine, like closer deep dive. And do you think he would be a good fit? Next to like Luka and Kyrie, if that Mavs roster plan was to come to fruition.
Yeah. So for me, I know the Mavs had him in. God, it's already been over a week ago, and they loved him. Heard the jump shot wasn't falling a ton, but they didn't care. Like they loved him, and that's the whole thing that you're getting with him: 70% from the line, 30% from 3. Not exactly the most promising numbers, but the intel is strong. He's overcome adversity in his life. He's a hard worker. He's a very good, happy-go-lucky guy. He's not going to get stuck on his shortcomings, things like that. Like if he has a bad night, he's not going to pout and just go like crying over. And instead of doing that, he's going to move on to the next thing and go, how can I get better? And things like that matter a ton. Also, he's 6'6". Let's name the ball handlers that can not even ball handlers, players that can take 3 dribbles in a half court setting over 6'6". It's Luka Doncic. That's it. And on top of that, I think Anthony Black might be the best perimeter defender in the draft. He's very close up there. I think it's actually probably Asar Thompson, but away from him and maybe like someone deeper in the draft. Look, when you got 2 steals a game, the defensive playmaking and menace, like he's somebody that you're going to want him on the last possession of the game to win you a game. Like if it's game 7 of the finals and you go, all right, the ball's going to say LeBron, whoever it is, Jimmy Butler, you want Anthony Black on that guy tomorrow. Like he is that much of a hound. He has such a great motor. Even though he's raw, he has all the tools you want of somebody long-term. And I feel like the offense will eventually find its way. He's athletic. He's really intelligent. I think he runs a good pick and roll, good passer, and he's raw there. Like his turnover issues haven't improved much since high school, and it's something that could get better. And again, with a work ethic, I just feel like all this is going to come together. I have him as a top 7 prospect for me.
Speaking of top 7 prospects, I'm interested because I'm thinking about risers and fallers here. Who is someone that you could see rising unexpectedly or someone who could fall unexpectedly, especially in the Mavericks case, being there if they stay at 10, that could be an option if that person were to fall a little bit there?
Yeah, I feel like this is about to be the time where we start hearing weird things. Like, I mean, about this time 5 years ago, about a week before the draft, honestly, even a little bit even closer, was like Jerome Robinson. He rose from a late 2nd round prospect to 13th out of nowhere. And there's still time for someone like that. We'll know because all the top prospects are now either last week or this week doing their visits with the top teams, right? Like Cam Whitmore, the day we're recording this Monday, they had him in Detroit. So that's a big landing spot for him. I don't think Cam Whitmore drops. I think it's going to be someone falls in love with someone else so much that they drop. If I had to pick one guy to drop, I really don't know what to make of the OTE program. I don't think it'll be Amen, which would be a dream for Dallas. Kind of like I said, one of the best defenders in the draft, and he's 6'6", 6'7". Asar Thompson, he might be the guy. And it's interesting because I don't think he can really shoot. He's a good playmaker, like he's an intelligent passer, but he's not a point guard. I want to make sure that this is established. He is not a point guard because he cannot put pressure on the rim out of his own dribbles. And when you can't do that, you can't be a point guard. So let's remove that label, just see him as almost a Josh Green similarity, right? Where he's somebody who get him off ball, going to the rim, it works, and he can pass, he can make the right decisions and defend the lights out. I mean, I had somebody at OTE say he's the best defender on ball that he's ever coached. So there's a lot to work with.
Wow.
So I think he's somebody that could unexpectedly drop to 10. And honestly, if I'm Dallas, I take that because even with the shortcomings offensively, the defense gets solved in so many ways that you can't get from one single, even free agent signing, unless it's like a premier defender.
Yeah, I think like with that in mind, let's say there's a scenario because I know it's impossible to know how things play out. But what if I don't even know if it's that realistic, but what if like one of Taylor Hendricks or Jarris Walker is on the board and Thompson is on the board as well? Would you just go with Jarris Walker or Hendricks over Thompson?
Personally, I would take, because just being consistent with my board, I have Asar Thompson at 11. I have Taylor Hendricks at 5, Jarris Walker at 6. So just being consistent, I would take whichever one of them is left over. I think they're more ready to contribute in more areas tomorrow than Asar Thompson is. Asar is going to be there on defense. Look, the Thompson twins, both their shots are negatives right now. And you can't say the same. Like Jarris Walker's towing that line, but he plays a very valuable role defensively. He's a connecting piece offensively. You can live with a poor shot more than Asar Thompson on the wing.
So tell me why Grady Dick is such a polarizing figure in this draft.
I think he's overthought. Here's how I see it. I wouldn't want to have tanked the final, or am I allowed to say that word on here?
Yep.
I know the league gets mad at it, so yeah, I wouldn't have wanted
750,000 reasons why you can.
That's right. Exactly.
you can censor it out if you need, but I wouldn't have wanted to tank for Grady Dick because great shooter. Unfortunately named because I have to think every time I say something about him that I'm not going to put myself in the trap. But with him, he's a 6'7" shooter, very intelligent. He's one of those players that I was kind of hinting at where when on defense, he's a liability on ball, but he has not only room to make up for it being 6'7", and he's actually a good athlete. I don't know why there's the label against him. I've seen him warm up in person and things like that. I've seen him at the combine. He's not slow and he's actually got bunnies. So I don't know. I think he's good, but defensively, the real selling point there, just beyond raw tools, is he does not miss rotations defensively. And that is huge. I think you can negate being a bad on-ball defender by just never leaving the wrong spot off ball and opening up something else for someone else. And that's very valuable. He's not got the high upside. I think that's why he's polarizing. But if you were to put him on the Mavs, he's playing 25, 30 minutes a game in his rookie season.
What do you think about some of his offensive abilities beyond the catch and shoot? Do you see some further upside as a playmaker, off the dribble score, anything of that nature that you think that maybe hasn't been highlighted as much? Or and what about his defense as well? You touched on it, but or analyzed it. But in terms on the ball, because I know this is getting a little too specific for a team situation. But I remember, I don't know why this stands out, maybe because it's the finals. But, when I went to, the game in Miami, it just stood out, the road game in March, how Jimmy Butler was being guarded by Tim Hardaway. And if you have that third perimeter player out there, I would imagine Grady Dick would, have the unfortunate responsibility of guarding Jimmy Butler. So, I guess with all that being said, I know I threw a lot at you on that question, but what do you think about just back to his offensive upside? Is there anything you think that goes beyond the catch and shoot? And then defensively, how far away or unfortunate do you think it would be if you're putting him in that spot to guard some of those higher level players on the ball?
Early on, I think he'd struggle, but he has he knows when guys are going up. The instincts are strong. He's able to time contests very well. He's intelligent in that regard, right? So I do think that is a nice saving grace. And also he's 6'7". So again, size, I can't say that, but I think with Grady Dick, it's just that him being 6'7" gets him more leeway, right? And I think one hidden upside area with him offensively is that while he did shoot 38%, I think is what it was, or 40% from three, excuse me, he shot 31% from the left corner and 26% from the right corner. That is a spot where he's going to be doing a lot of shooting, and he shot 40% not being a corner shooter. I think there's very elite shooting ability up there, just upside. And also he's a good movement shooter. He's somebody the Mavs have had maybe one movement shooter over the last, just trying to think, it's been several years, JJ Redick, and he played 20 games, 30 games tops. If that, that might be an extreme overstatement. The Mavs just haven't had someone like that. And again, if they get a screener too, that's, more deadly in handoffs, you just opened up a lot more 3-point opportunities already for a good 3-point shooting team too.
So let's talk about scenarios where obviously we've talked about them keeping the 10 pick. There's expectation that this team is going to move off the number 10 pick and try to get some veteran, help to be able to win now. If you're looking and running this team, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to maybe move back to collect another first round, to stay within the first round while still getting some veteran help? Or are you looking to move off it completely to see what you can get out there to try and help this team win now?
Yeah, there's two scenarios for it, right? I don't think I'm in favor of just salary dumping, right? For the sake of, I think you have to make a pick this draft. That's a must. Ideally, what would be neat is look, I think the late lottery, really 9 through 14, there's a lot of risk picking there. You pick 15 through 25. I actually think there's a lot safer players, at least say my board went the same way. which I'll be posting later this week to kind of see. There's just so many high floor guys with good upsides. And there are some, low floor, high upside risks mixed in there. But generally speaking, I think if you can get one of those, the ideal dream is move back even 10 spots. Like, fine. You swallow the pill of, we tanked for that. Like, you go for the 20th pick. But there's somebody who's going to fall. Like, there's really good plays to Reek Whitehead, somebody who he was a top 3 recruit, had an injury riddled season, had his second, he had to get a foot surgery, if I'm not mistaken, for 2 foot injuries throughout the year. Really high upside, though, just an absolute misfit at Duke that his stats understated his ability. But the dream would be to get that plus a 2024 pick, even if it's like the 30th pick. It doesn't matter, because then the assets are all freed up. Then you can start trading the whole owing the 2024 pick to the Knicks, would be completely negated. And then you're not handicapped. You only have one pick, which is the 2029 pick that would be to consider in trades. So I think that would open up a ton. That's the dream for me. Move to 20, take somebody that you could probably get at 14 or 15 in an ideal world that other teams aren't going to be hunting as hard, and get a pick in the future. But that may be too much to ask for.
Go ahead, Grant.
Oh, yeah. And in terms of like just thinking out loud about potential trade down scenarios, it seems like, a couple teams or trade partners that, kind of have been brought up in like kind of ideas and speculation. I think the Atlanta Hawks at the 15th pick. I think, the general idea or hope for some would be like, to get a Clint Capella with their salary situation, or the Brooklyn Nets to get maybe a wing, because I know they have multiple picks in the 20s. If you had both of those scenarios just kind of like on the table, let's say you're like running the war room, which one would you prefer? And if you were to take the Nets one, what wing would you want that you could reasonably get?
And remind me, what was the Hawks specifics again?
They were 15th pick, and they have a lot of salary situation that they'll probably need to move off of, because DeJounte Murray will need an extension soon.
And Okongwu, yeah. So it would be like Capella and 15 for 10 or something?
Yeah, something along those lines.
Cool. So
yeah, like just the general framework.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I got that you do get the pick back with it. Yeah, I mean, I think I would probably take that. And if I'm at 15, if Jordan Hawkins is there, I mean, I'm jumping up and down. I think he's somebody, he made a name for himself in the NCAA tournament. I was very skeptical to get on to the hype train with him. He shot poorly as a freshman, but it really just more reps. That's all it was. He became more efficient with more reps. He put in the work in the offseason. And also, he's way more than just a shooter. And I get he's 6'5", doesn't have like extremely long arms or anything, but defensively, he knows what to do. Passing, he sees the floor well. Like, he's somebody, again, the Mavs just don't have enough players over 6'4" that can even attack a closeout right now. Then more than just like, all right, pump fake, one dribble, pull up. That's not attacking a closeout. I think that would be just absolutely beneficial. And Hawkins can do that. He's a little bit crafty near the rim. He's growing. I think he's somebody that if it were, I think he could be just a really all-around wing with a specialty at shooting.
So run it down for me. Obviously, Victor Wembanyama is your number one player for everyone, including, I'm sure, for yourself as well.
Yes.
But 2 through 5, who are your top 5? And what do you see as we kind of look at a little bit broader picture? What could you see happening? We hear, ideas about maybe the Pelicans trying to move up into the top 3, maybe with the Blazers, what are they going to do with maybe Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller? What are you kind of starting to see based on what we're looking at, 10 days out as we record this?
A lot of smoke screens. I think both the Blazers and the Hornets want to up that trade value, because it's almost like what the Magic did. They learned, right? Where they're like, okay, we know who we want. We may not have to take him at 2/3. For all we know, the Blazers could be loving Amen Thompson. Or Asar Thompson. I don't think that's the case. I do think it is the traditional top 3. And my top 3 goes Wembanyama, Scoot, and Brandon Miller. And then 4 or 5 is Amen Thompson, Taylor Hendricks. I don't think there's some wild curveball like there was last year. I just think we don't know. And I don't trust that the Hornets are all in on Brandon Miller, because the Hornets are a very tight-lipped organization, like half of that division as well. And to me, that just all of it screams smoke screen. So I think they're really trying to all drive up the price against each other. Ideally, if I had to make it work out, I don't know. I don't see the Pelicans doing it. It would be cool because they have all these assets and things like that too, but just letting LaMelo and Scoot play together, they fit. I think there's a massive misconception there. LaMelo is great at playing off ball. Scoot can play off ball. He didn't really have another point guard with him, so he never got to this year. Brandon Miller's going to be a good player. I think the upside, though, is just so obviously in Scoot's favor. And he killed it in the G League, even not even trying half the time while being hurt. So for me, I think it should just go in that order: Victor, Scoot, Brandon Miller. But there's way too much smoke right now to navigate through.
And that fit with the Hornets with LaMelo and Scoot, I agree. There's a lot to like about it. I feel like you need multiple sources of that like aggressive rim pressure in the half court. But what about some other like potential fits? Like in terms of like if the team was to trade up and he was to go like third, is there any team that stands out that you think in terms of like a reasonable sort of like option that you like in particular?
And you're saying for Scoot?
Yeah, for Scoot, like say like Brandon Miller goes 2 and Scoot's available, and basically like the Trailblazers are shopping the pick, and there's teams trying to trade for it. What team? Are there any teams? I guess not like the best team, but like are there any teams that you like in particular for a hypothetical like Scoot Henderson fit?
I'm just shocked Utah's name hasn't come up. They need a point guard. They feel like an ideal spot for him. They have all of Minnesota's future, which seems very bleak at the moment. There's just too much to like, right? And they have the 9th pick. So like you get 9, you get them. You could honestly flip a good portion of Minnesota's future. However, like if it's 2027 and 2029, that's probably the valuable ones. I would say they're even Cleveland because they also have all the Donovan Mitchell stuff. Like there's a lot to fall back on and say, hey, how much do you actually think these teams, and actually I forgot about this one. They have the Lakers 2027 pick. Like they have all these like very valuable weapons of teams falling apart in their timeline that it could really backfire. And that is super valuable. I feel like they can make the offer of 9. They could throw in a player in there as well. I don't know who, but they have options. And then you give all those future picks that they ask for, however much it is. If it's 2 of each team, fine, whatever. That seems like a lot. But, however much they ask for, they have the ammo to do it.
As we get ready to close here today, obviously there's a lot of things that are going to be happening within the next 10 days as we record this, as we lead to the NBA draft. But for the Mavericks, as we get ready to end specifically here, they keep the 10 pick. They don't trade it. Who are you taking and who do you feel comfortable with in your idealistic, realistic scenario based on what we kind of know at this point and what we think might happen as we get closer to the draft?
Yeah, I think they're going to end up taking Taylor Hendricks. I think teams are going to overthink him being at UCF. It's just a lot easier to talk yourself into a guy who, like Jarris Walker, who has already played his rookie year role, did it very well on a team that made it to the second weekend of March. I think there's just a lot to like in that regard for teams that are trying to win now. Like Utah, they could be the one to snipe and say, all right, we've got a connecting piece 4. We're already, in the same boat as the Mavs by record. They're trying to make the playoffs next year in that regard. Obviously different championship aspirations right now, but I think that's going to leave Taylor Hendricks. I think teams really will overthink him. If it's not him, they'll overthink Anthony Black. I can't see all of those intangibles and everything. I think the Mavs would be insanely lucky to have him at 10.
Well, I'm sure Mavericks fans would love to see that and for that to happen on draft night, given the position that they're in and what they're trying to do, the way this thing is starting to go with the collective bargaining agreement, trying to get younger, trying to get your books in order, going younger and having some, capability to be able to win in the future is definitely something that teams are going to be looking for sure. Richard, before we let you go, tell the folks where you're at, what you're doing these days, and what are your last 10 days of prep look like as you get ready for this year's version of the NBA draft.
Yeah, I do community mocks. I have 3 more coming, and they paint a good picture. Almost every year I get a good portion of the top 10 right. I say we really do, where it's, we've got, like, I know in 2021, somebody had Jalen Suggs and Franz Wagner, exactly how it played out, like things like that. Jonathan Kuminga to the Warriors, like almost the top 10 was entirely perfect. And it really predicts the unpredictability because you have so many different people with so many different approaches. So I think that's fun. Doing scouting reports on every player. So continue after the draft too. And then Locked On NBA Big Board as well. So, and then on Twitter at Mavs Draft, I post about every one of those things all at once. So that's where you can find me.
Well, you have done terrific work leading up into this draft. We know this is kind of the last sprint to the finish before this year's NBA draft starts, and it's right preparing for 2024 right after this draft is over. Hopefully, do you get a little bit of a break between, the end of the NBA draft and before you start your prep work for next year?
Well, Peach Jam is pretty similar or pretty closely timed, and then I'm going to try and go to Summer League. So yes, but no. And
okay,
that's when I started diving in on all the high school stuff that I missed while watching this draft class. So yes and no.
Okay. Well, hopefully you'll get a little bit of rest between now and then be able to dive right back into it. But we really appreciate you taking the time with us here on Inside the Mavs. And we again appreciate all your hard work leading up into this draft. I hope everything goes well for you, man.
Thank you.
That is it for Inside the Mavs. Again, you can download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Make sure you give the podcast a 5-star rating, write a review while you're there. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter. You can follow Richard on Twitter at Mavs Draft. You can find Grant on Twitter at Grant Afseth, and you can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. We'll be back a little bit later on this week for another episode of Inside the Mavs as we get you that much closer to the NBA draft. Again, the NBA draft on Thursday, June 22nd. The Mavericks holding the number 10 overall pick. We'll have you ready and cover for everything for the Dallas Mavericks. Up until then, for Richard, for my man Grant Afseth, my name is Kevin Gray. This has been Inside the Mavs. We'll talk to you later. Peace.